Hello, Booktube. I'm here to do a tag. I couldn't let this one pass up. It's quite good. I just saw um, James Holder do it. It's called the History Reading Challenge tag, and originally done by Ghost Reader. And looks like a quite interesting channel. I'll link both in below. Uh, Now, there's only 10 questions, and I say only, and I stress the word only, but in the words of Captain Oates, I may be sometime. Question one: what first got you into history? Now, I have mentioned this before, but I haven't really sort of gone into any detail. It actually is a sort of rockabilly country singer called Johnny Horton. He was around in the 50s, died in a car accident, but he wrote a lot of songs sort of about American history, like the War of 1812, Sink to Bismarck, on and on and on. And they were about historical events. And I grew up listening to this. My dad played this music, he liked him as well. And hearing it over and over again, I guess, from sort of the crib. And I was wondering if any of this stuff was real. So once I was able to, had access to a library, and I'm assuming memory is a bit uh, uh, hazy around those periods. I don't remember ever going to a public library, so it must have been a school library. And looking up some of this stuff, probably in an encyclopedia first of all. I wouldn't doubt may have been uh, Britannica or whatever, and exploring some of that and liking it and liking the fact that it could be popularized in this way. And of course, during all that, I remember pulling off a book off of a shelf, and I do have this memory. It was sort of ancient cultures. I think it was probably it was either a National Geographic or a Time Life book. I'm not 100% sure which, but I remember opening it up and, pictures of the Sphinx, the pyramids, just everything, the gates. That Just trying to remember. See, my memory is sometimes really shaky at times for specific things. I had to make a list of a couple things here because while my brain was working. But it's like um, places like Mesopotamian stuff, the uh, pyramids in South America, in Mesoamerica, um, as well. It just everything, and it just fascinated me, and I just wanted to learn more, and so I just continued to just explore. And it led me, when I went to school, I took every history course that I could think of. I wound up taking, like, I don't know how many history courses for, like, grade 13, which was prior to university. I remember a Canadian history course, a European history course, American history course. There was an ancient history course. There was sort of a historical geography course. It just anything I could do, I grabbed it, and so that got me into history. And then eventually, as a hiatus for about 5 years, I didn't go to school, and then I just got tired of all this, and I wanted to go for archaeology, and I did. Um, Number two, what is your favorite history book author? That is really difficult to say, because there's so many. I have read so many, and that's where I made a little list here of because I was interested in all types of history, ancient history, I think, predominantly, but even more recent history. But like the ancient Near East, Greece and Rome as well, and even further afield, I was interested in ancient North American history, Mesoamerican history, South American history. Uh, but I made wow, the authors that I read are going to be now ones that are older authors. There's all sorts of new stuff in the past 30 years or so that I am not familiar with at all. And the teachers that I had were obviously in their, they're of the old school, and basically it'll be the first half of the 20th century sort of authors type, and that's where I learned these from and read and enjoyed. I'll just go through like H.W.F. Saggs, Near Eastern stuff. James Henry Breasted, who did Egypt and again Near Eastern. Gene Patero, Assyriologist. A. Leo Oppenheim, again, Mesopotamia. Austin Henry Layard. I read everything I could lay my hands on about him and by him. Again, he was Syrian. William Matthew Flinders Petrie, or I should say Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, Egyptologist. I loved his books. I used to collect occasionally. Well, anytime I saw him, I had about a half a dozen or more. He would write these little things. I think in a previous one I misspoke and said Howard Carter for some reason. As I said, my memory sometimes that I misspeak, but it is Petrie. He'd write something like 10 years digging in Egypt or something like that, and it'd be just sort of from his diary and notes, and they're just in there. There's illustrations through them. I remember having these and just loving them, rereading them all the time. C.W. Saram, which did the Gods, Graves, and Scholars, and a few other books. He did one on North American archaeologists, the same as sort of the ancient Near East and classical, and that was just a fantastic book, and I'd want to get it and reread it again because it's just such a journey and opened up sort of my mind and just the wonder and the excitement of history and all these stories of these are pioneers going into these areas during the 19th century that nobody had really studied this stuff, and they're the pioneers doing this work. Creating methodology like Howard Carter did. He created he created ways of cataloging that are still used to a certain extent for preserving materials. The same as all of them. They rose to the challenge, and as well sometimes with sort of gunshots going off after them, bandits here and there, or you get like Belzoni, the strong man of Egypt. Where he's I love it. Like I've never actually read his diaries, and that's the one thing I do want to get. And I know there is a book, White Star Publications, that has put out his diaries, and I really got to get my fingers on that. But I remember reading bits of it where he was called the strong man of Egypt because he was a strong man in a circus or that kind of thing, and he went to Egypt and he was doing stuff on pumping water and moving water, hydraulics. But it didn't really pay off that well, and he heard about tombs and stuff like this. So he'd take dynamite and he'd blow up tombs. It's insane. But it's just there's a scene that I read and from his diary where he's going through like a small corridor of where poor people of the time would be able to latch on to the afterworld of the more richer person. So there'd be mummies in their, desiccated bodies. And he's just ripping them to shreds, trying to get through to the goodies. It's just bizarre and fascinating reading. That's why I say this is going to take a while. Because I'm just going to go through sort of a memory lane here a little bit. The C.W. Saram, and there's no order to any of these. I just sort of started listing them as soon as I thought of John Romer, a more recent Egyptologist who I really, really like. Fabulous documentaries. Ancient Lives is about Deir al-Medina. It's about a 6 or 7 part series about the workman's village that built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Oh, when I was in Egypt, I really, really wanted to get there, but there was a couple things that derailed me. A couple weeks in jail did it, but one of the other things, I still was determined to go down there, but I was hit. I was knocked off my feet sort of by the buses. Never would stop. They would just sort of slow down a little bit. People would jump on and then come off, and I was waiting, and I got hit. My glasses went into the traffic and got smashed. So like this was, so I just, after all this, and I could barely see, the sunlight was just killing me. So, and I was still determined though, but I went down to the train station, and looked at my ticket that I had bought the day before, and could find this, and then I find out they sold me a ticket for the week before, and I couldn't get down there. So, oh well. So I just said screw it, and I took a flight back to Amman, Jordan. Anyway, John Romer, Egyptology. Robert and Linda Braidwood, again, Mesopotamian stuff, just fantastic writing. Louis Binford, American centered archaeologist, a lot of theory of archaeology. Henri Frankfort, again, Near Eastern. James Pritchard, who did a lot of translations and documents from Sumeria and Mesopotamia and a wider area. Gordon Wiley, Arthur Evans for Gnosis. Desmond Clark, who was I have an interest in African archaeology as well, and he did stuff there. Alan Gardner, when I thought I'd learn hieroglyphs and yeah, well, I tried. Kathleen Kenyon, who excavated at Jerusalem and Jericho. I had a professor who actually excavated with her, so it was and that was the thing. My professors were a bridge between these people and me, which was really fantastic. Leonard Woolley, again, another, I loved his writing of Mesopotamia and so forth. And then going a little further, like Louis Leakey, Mary Leakey, and then their son Richard Leakey for early man in Olduvai Gorge. In Kenya. I used to have all their books, and yeah, it just loved reading this stuff. So anyway, that's a bit of a divergence there, but let's get back to the questions here. I'm only on number 3. What is your most anticipated history book you have not read yet? I'm sure there's lots out there. Well, there's actually one I've got. I started reading it, but I didn't. It's on sort of I can't remember the name of it now. Let's see, it got accidentally stuck way up to the ceiling, so that's why I stopped reading it. And I can't get it at the moment myself. But it's about North Africa. It's about just the sort of the Sudan area, and the civilizations that were there in the cities, early Islamic cities and pre-Islamic as well. Which I have a big interest in. But ones that I found, like John Romer has done, I don't know if he's going to continue, but it looks like he's done some massive books that bring up maybe just to the Middle Kingdom, I think, but a history of ancient Egypt, which I do want to get. I think they're to print, but I missed these somewhere along the way, so I'm keeping an eye out. Like, I'm never going to see them, I don't think, in a bookshop here, but I look periodically online to see if I can find a nice copy, but a good price. What is your favorite time period and why? What book do you want to read and have read about it? Ooh. That is, there's so many areas that I'm interested in, but I mentioned the one there, African, sort of pre-colonial African history and archaeology. I've always had an interest in, and I there's so much there, and it's sort of an unknown area because it goes into Islamic studies, and it's never taught. Like, basically, the historians have, they write a history of the world, and usually it's just, if you get anything about Africa, it's like, well, not much happened there. Well, not really. Before, the Europeans went in, there was massive trade routes, there was high cultural cities, and that was all destroyed later. So there's a lot of interest there. And then there's the Olduvai Gorge, early man stuff in Kenya. But other areas that I was interested in, because I don't know too much about, is the Russian steppes, and specifically sort of the Ural Mountains or Ural area, the cultures there. there's these mounds, and what are they called now? Uh, Kurgans, I think. Yeah, I see. Again, my memory. I should have looked this up to see, but it just I don't know much about the history of that area, and it's been, I think there's Russian archaeologists that have worked on it, but I've read very little of it, and I always thought that would be interesting because I found it interesting because I knew nothing about it, and it just seemed so fascinating in this area. Uh, but yeah, and other than that, like I say, African, and I don't know much about ancient China. I don't know much or ancient, the whole Asia sort of thing too. Is sort of there's I know the basics. I know some of the stuff, but not a whole lot. So anything like that I don't know, I've always been interested in it, and I've read very little of this material. Number six, what is your favorite person in history? What book do you want to read or have read about it? Again, that's really, really difficult. There's a lot of stuff. I find well, I'm fascinated by the Deir al Medina, the workman's village, and I did projects on it, and I had the excavation reports or French excavation reports. I can't read French, but it's funny how even though I can't read French, and I had a dictionary that I could actually understand because it was an excavation report. I could understand quite a bit of it, and there's that. And prior to that, well, not so much prior to that, I find Amarna interesting, Megiddo, because that's all sort of, yeah. No, it's just there's so many periods and personalities. I guess Akhenaten is interesting. Hatshepsut in Egypt. And I really, really find interesting the early Sumerian material. Very, very interesting. And yeah, there's a lot there that I find. I find too much of it of interest, but yeah, those I guess would narrow it down a little more. Uh, and again, talking about the African stuff because I have learned a little more about this, and I like the history around Timbuktu, and there's other big city states that were around that area as well. Um, Number seven, what history topic would you like to see more fiction or nonfiction books about? I'd like to see more in the mainstream about African history, about pre-colonial African history. There's a fabulous uh, documentary that was done. It's called Africa, um, and it was done in the early '80s. And it's an eye opener to people about what Africa was like, and the civilization that was there, the trade routes that was there. It's just fascinating. But I'd like to see more of things like that. I'd like to see more of the popular things they always get, like Egypt, and little things like that. But the less popular ones, which could become popular because they're just as equally fascinating. Like James Holder mentioned the Hittites, and I always find that's very interesting as well. Like that civilization, Ugaritic civilization, all this stuff that the Ugaritic wrote in cuneiform. And I just love to see more. I love to see more of the literature being published, and the Hittite literature. It just on and on and on. There's just so much there that would be great to see, a little more popularized. What non-book resources do you enjoy when learning about history? Well, I guess I'm sort of old school because um, I don't really use the internet much. Well, I do to a certain extent when I want to find a specific topic, and I'm sure there's some great stuff there that has been done with archaeology or history in general. But I think I'm with James Holder documentaries, but they have been failing in the past decade or two. They're not like they were. Like Michael Wood's, his like Troy, that sort of like Troy. I think In Search of Troy was the one thing that's finally twisted my arm. Yeah, I'm going to university for archaeology. It was the thing that was this deciding factor for me. Uh, and that's where I started reading a whole bunch of stuff about Schliemann, and his writing. And it was great to meet Michael Wood as well, and then a lot of his other documentaries are great, and they're not dumbed down, and that's the one thing that I find in a lot of documentaries recently. It's like they get an expert on there, and they'll describe something, and then they get there's a Scottish archaeologist that's popular. He's sort of pretty, so he fits on camera well, but he gets an expert to talk about something, and then he dumbs down the thing. So the expert says one thing that is perfectly clear and understandable, and then the other guy repeats it in a dumbed down way, and it's like you're wasting time here. You're wasting airtime where you could do a lot more. And I can understand. That some people don't understand certain things. There's certain levels, but make those different levels of documentaries. Make introductory documentaries, and I've seen some that are supposed to be sort of university level course ones that have been done in the past 10 or 15 years, and it's like they're made for like grade school children, not university level. You should, by that time, know certain basics of things. And if you don't, well, go back to, have these basic ones, and then you build yourself up. But anyway. Favorite history quote, fun fact. There's a few that I could never tell. Because I'd probably still get people in trouble. Well, I like the that story that I told about Belzoni, and just these other ones of Flinders Petrie. There's some weird stories there. He was a strange guy. I just there is one. So because I'll keep it very vague. I'll keep it very vague. There was somebody that thought they would pull a little joke at an excavation. And I'm sure this has happened many times, but I don't know how far others have gone. I mean, that the joke actually went too far and it can't be sort of stopped. And they actually, they almost like used a felt marker and wrote something on a piece of stone. And it got into the excavation catalog and the excavation report. And by the time it sort of, they sort of knew that it was too far. It was too far for them to stop it, because it would have caused major havoc. It hasn't changed any theories or anything like that, thankfully, which I don't see how it could. But it's just stories like, and there's other ones that I know that pranks have been played and things like that. But as I say, I think I'd still get some people in trouble if I told too much sort of tales out of school. But yeah, no, there's lots, and there's throughout history. There's so many things, but I'm just sort of concentrating on sort of ancient history, sort of for this part. Okay, well, I guess that's not too bad. I've been some time, but it's 25 minutes coming up to. Number 10, shout out a booktuber you enjoy who also reads history. Jason has already done a few. Jason at I Was in Bookland. I would say Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads, because in some ways I think we have fairly similar past in archaeology. He went a different one way, and I went another way. After that, well, we're just we've separated. But yeah, I would shout out to Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads, and I'll leave a link to his channel down below. Um, and he might actually, because I know he's been to Russia, but I don't know what he was doing in archaeology wise in Russia. Maybe he's done some of the work in areas that I was talking about. So that'd be interesting to hear if he wants to do the this challenge. Anyway, I will leave it there, Booktube. So just under 26 minutes. So not too bad. Take care, Booktube.